Today's February 12th, 2014. We're on the record at 10:04 a.m. to video record the deposition of Lawrence Steinberg in the case styled Eric B. Fletcher versus Nick Mineros et al. Will counsel please state their appearances?
Eric Fletcher for the plaintiff.
Sal, Melly, Gilbride, Tusa, Last, and Spillane, attorneys for Nicholas Minero Jr. and Nick Mineros 2 Inc. There are two matters that are consolidated in this matter. And Mr. Fletcher, if I may, our clients are reserving all of their rights with respect to asserting any objections at trial. They will assert I will assert on their behalf any objections as to form, which we will be waiving any objections as to form at trial, but again, reserving all rights with respect to other objections. Thank you.
Will the court reporter please swear in the witness?
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony about to give us the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so be God?
I do.
Mr. Steinberg, thank you for coming today.
Nice to see you, Eric.
As you know, you voluntarily appeared today with the understanding that there was a commission filed in the state of Connecticut as well as a notice of deposition that will be heard on February 22nd. That's the document that you have before you, placed before you now for yourself. I'm also handing you here for the courts, for the record. This will be Exhibit 1. And 2, which are the notice of deposition and the, well, just here, this is your copy for you personally, and then that's going to her for the court as of right now.
Okay. Where do you want me to put this?
Just hand it to her. We've already worked it out. She's just going to stack them over there because we're a little cramped for space. So I wanted to first thank you for coming in, and I understand your time constraints and
thank you,
anything
Eric.
else. So
appreciate that.
if we could you please state for the record your educational experience?
Sure. My name is Lawrence B. Steinberg, born in Winnipeg, Canada. I was a attorney in Canada for 18 years before moving to Florida in 1994. I subsequently got my call to the Florida Bar in 1999, and now I'm called to the Florida Bar. I graduated from the University of Manitoba Law School, University of Western Ontario Business School, and Nova University in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
How long did you work for Nick Mineros too?
I believe we were first engaged in 2005, and we continued along until the summer of 2011.
I'm going to show you this. This is Steinberg Exhibit 3. If you could familiarize yourself with that.
How many pages, Mr. Fletcher?
3 pages in total. Actually, there should be 4 pages in total.
This is 3?
Yes, Exhibit 3, 4 pages in total.
Don't want. I just can't.
That's okay. That's okay. If I may, would this be referencing you? Do you recognize that fax number, or that you were ever called Laurie Steinberg?
Oh yes. Yes, I'm commonly known as Laurie Steinberg as well.
Okay, and then that would be from February 20. Would the date be February 20th, 2005?
2005, correct.
Would this be one of the earlier dates that we had kind of worked together?
Very early on.
And would this have been an Intuit account? Is this an Intuit account? Is this an employment payroll company?
Form.
Contract?
Form.
Payroll services agreement. Well, I would agree with you.
So were we sending you some of these informations to keep you updated on what was going on at the company?
At the beginning, I guess you were. Okay.
And would this have given Nicholas Monero access to the payroll account?
Let's see what it says. Well, it names you and Nicholas and Mike Caldwell. I think we believe Mike gave us the introduction to you.
Yes.
Correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Planters, limited power of attorney and taxman. I would agree that Nicholas would have access to the payroll with this document.
And that we had met through Mike Caldwell, who was a banker. Was Mike Caldwell? Who was Mike Caldwell?
Mike Caldwell was, I believe, it was a loan officer or lending officer. He was an official with then Union Planters Bank.
Yes.
And I believe Union Planters Bank provided the financing for the acquisition of the Dunedin building. And Mike was the loan officer at the time.
To the best of your recollection.
To the best of my recollection, right.
Thank you. We're finished with that one. Approximately how many deals do you think you were involved with Monero's? And if you don't mind, when I reference Monero's, I'm referencing Nick Monero's II of Florida.
Nick Monero's II of Florida?
When I reference Monero's, and I will reference myself when I refer to Auric Fetcher.
Okay. Nick Monero's II, we did Dunedin, we did Pinehurst, and I believe we did El Paso.
Were there any other, were you involved in, were those refinancings or were those
were
purchase and sales?
acquisitions.
Form. Mr. Steinberg, if I may, if you can just allow him to answer finish asking the question first.
Yeah.
Before you answer, because our transcript gets very messy.
Okay.
And it will allow me the opportunity, if I need to object.
I would do so.
Thank you, sir.
I'm going to mark this Exhibit 4 just to see if it refreshes your memory at all. Were you primarily involved in, hold on a second, I'm going to give you a paper clip here so I can keep everything in order. Were you primarily involved in, what type of law do you practice?
Real estate law.
What do you usually do in real estate law?
I do property acquisitions, property sales, property financing, the whole gamut.
Were those the things that you were hired by Monero?
That's what I was hired to do for Nick Monero.
Form. Did you get?
You can still answer the question when he objects to form, but please refresh us.
Okay, loan closing statement, Burger Stearman, Sovereign Bank. Okay, this is the. Okay, this is the Dunedin building acquisition settlement statement. We did a refi with Sovereign, so there should be a closing statement for Sovereign, then another refi with Sovereign.
Would this be reflective of some of those deals that we did?
Yes.
Thank you. That's all that I need. In those deals, how often did I do the negotiations?
I would say that you were primarily responsible for the negotiations.
If I may, this is going to be Steinberg Exhibit 5. It's going to be a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 pages in total. If you can you can go over these as you like, but if you can briefly go through these we're up to 5. Briefly go through these to check through and see if they're representative.
Mr. Fetcher, may I see that document before you hand it to the witness?
Sure,
so
it's going to be...
Follow along, sir. Thank you. On this document, it looks like it's been marked as an original to another.
Yeah, I mean, I put the sticker, it should be on this one. It should be on this stock. It should be on this copy. This should be 10. I should have 10 in my hand. It should be everything up through Chicago Title Company. And if you don't mind, can you just, a sticker to mark this 5? Here, you can refresh yourself with, familiarize yourself with this while he's prepared. That's exhibit. Yeah, because this is, I have an original, these were my copies, so I have some of the originals from.
Right now.
Can we go off the record for a second?
We're off the record at 10:15. The time is 10:16 a.m. We're back on the record.
Okay.
Are you familiar with any of those documents?
I've seen a couple of them in the past, yes.
Would those be representative of my negotiations?
Yes.
Objection as to form.
Would those be representative of the relationship between the two that we had concerning deal making?
Form.
The relationship between you and I?
Between you and I, between myself as an employee of Nick Manero's 2 and
Yes.
yourself as an attorney.
All right,
Mr. Steinberg,
sorry.
if you may let him first finish answering the question so that I can object as to form.
Okay.
If you're familiar with those documents, would those be the types of documents that I would send you during negotiations?
Yes, they would.
Thank you. Did we usually have multiple drafts of contracts that we were creating?
Typically, documents that we prepared would go through a few sets of revisions.
And did we change the terms often?
Form.
Well, if there were revisions, that would connotate that terms would change. Correct.
Were you responsible for the completion of the documents and the legality of those documents?
Typically, yes.
Did you and I have discussions concerning important points to include in the negotiations?
Form.
Yes, I believe we did.
Did we discuss important points to include in final drafts?
Yes, we did.
Thank you. If I may, we're finished with that one. We're up to 6. This is Steinberg 6. Do you recognize this document?
It's the settlement statement for the purchase of the Houston buildings.
Were we involved? Did we work together on that deal?
Yes, we did.
Do you remember that deal?
Yes, I do.
Do you remember the situation with Countrywide at that time?
I remember that Countrywide was in a crisis mode and that we had discussed the necessity to get the deal done and the building financed.
Did you at any point suggest canceling that deal?
I don't recall.
That's okay. If you don't recall, don't recall.
Okay.
Did you ever request Nick to think about taking cash rather than doing a 1031 exchange?
Yes, that I recall.
Could you please explain what what you remember of that situation?
My concern for Nick was putting all his eggs in one basket, quite frankly. This was a deal that, even though he could hire third-party management, he would still be one step removed, and one hiccup in the economy, either way, could put him, the companies, and his personal guarantee at risk. So I was very concerned, as a matter of fact, and my counsel to him was to not go ahead with this deal and put all his eggs in one basket. I'm sorry to repeat myself,
That's okay.
but that was my concern.
Do you remember what would be influential in making that decision?
Form.
Did we discuss the tax implications of that deal?
In fact, objection, Mr. Form, can you please clarify we, Mr. Fetcher? That's the basis of my formal
Okay.
objection.
Mr. Steinberg, did you and I ever discuss the tax implications of not proceeding with the 1031? To the best of your recollection.
We might have, because it certainly was Nick's feeling that he did not want to pay tax. So it would have come up, but my sense is that it was a general discussion as opposed to specific tax considerations.
Do you remember him ever saying that he had been advised the taxes would be half of the total proceeds?
I can't recall an exact number, but I do recall him saying that it was advantageous for him to do a 1031 from a tax perspective.
Had you done any tax work or tax calculations on that deal?
No.
Do you know of anyone that did tax calculations on that deal?
Not that I recall.
Do you know who Mr. Jim Bassett is?
Jim Bassett is Nick's accountant in Greenwich.
Do you know at what point he was first involved in any of the deals for Nick Monero's too?
I really, no, I don't.
That's fine. Moving on. Do you know who Robert Manella is?
Yes, I do.
Could you please tell us who Robert Manella is?
Robert Manella is a Florida accountant, and I believe we referred Nick and you to Robert to be your Florida accountant.
Would that be after the close of the restaurant?
That
Or at
would
what
be
point?
in,
Excuse me. Let me rephrase. At what point in time did you refer us? Was it?
it would have been in conjunction with the purchase of the Dunedin building.
So would that have been toward the beginning of our relationship as well?
Form.
Or approximate year?
Yes.
Let me rephrase. Would that have been the approximate timeline? The approximate time?
Yes, I believe so.
Can I please, this is going to be Exhibit 8. Oh, it's actually Exhibit 7. It's one page. Is that the Robert, is that?
Manella and Associates.
Do you see the date on this document?
Yes.
Yes, I do.
What's the date on this document?
December 14th, 2007.
Do you see what this invoice is for?
Yes, I do.
Could you please tell us what this invoice was for?
It is invoice number 10913, prepare Florida sales and use tax application for rental property.
Do you know what that's about?
Yes, that seems to be related to the tax that would be charged on the rent that the Dunedin building would generate.
Had you ever had any discussions about that issue?
No.
Were you aware of the fact that that was an issue?
No.
Did you have any knowledge of the sales tax issue ever coming up?
I was made aware subsequently.
When you say subsequently, do you know when?
It would have been a few years after you purchased, or Monero's purchased the building. And I believe you contacted our office to deal with the Florida Department of Revenue concerning sales tax that had been collected but not remitted.
Had I ever had you contact Mr. Manella about anything else?
Yes, you did. You were concerned about the length of response time that you got from Mr. Manella's office.
As a result of those conversations, do you know what happened as a result of those conversations?
Well, I think there are two. One is you engaged our office to negotiate a settlement with the Florida Department of Revenue as to sales tax not remitted. And I believe that you were asked us for alternate accounting professionals.
Moving on to Exhibit 8, you can hand that over. Just, actually, you know what? Will you remember the date on that document? I'm handing you now Exhibit 8, Steinberg Exhibit 8. Will you familiarize yourself with that?
Yes, I
Do you know?
He said, yes,
Yes, I see the date. June 17th, 2008.
I meant to remember the date of the previous document.
Right. That was December 14th, 2007.
Do you know, are you familiar with this document?
I'm not familiar with it, no.
Do you know the person and the people involved in this, the names mentioned?
I know Robert Manella and I know Elizabeth A. Dunn.
Who is Elizabeth A. Dunn?
Elizabeth A. Dunn was the alternate accounting firm which I suggested you engage if you were unhappy with Mr. Manella.
Would it be fair to say at this point in time she would have been also aware that the sales tax issue had already been discussed?
I'm not sure what she would have been aware of.
Were you aware at this time that the sales tax was an issue?
I can't recall if I was aware then. It would all depend on when we were engaged to deal with the Department of Revenue. And I can't remember if it was in 2008 or 2009. My sense is that it was 2009 is when we contacted the department. And I was unaware that there was a sales tax issue until that point.
Were you aware that I was having a problem with Mr. Manella at this point?
As of the date of this letter, yes, I was aware you're having an issue with Mr. Manella.
Okay, moving on. This was previous plaintiff's Exhibit 41. This will be, are we up to, that was 8? This will be 9. This is 2 pages. Do you know what this document is?
This document is a notice of delinquency issued to Nick Monero's 2, Inc. Regarding 830 Douglas Avenue, the Dunedin building.
Are you at all familiar with delinquency notices?
Not really, no.
does it appear to you that any money or any is owed at this point in time?
Well, this document is asking for a sales and use tax return for 2008. And I take it that one was never received because you got the notice of delinquency. And I can't tell from this whether money would be owed or not.
Correct. As of, would you say that this notice of delinquency, what's the period that this notice of delinquency reflects? What's the collection period?
Form.
Do you see the
collection period begin December 1st, 2008. Collection period end December 31st, 2008. Return due date would be January 1st, 2009. And the date of the notice was February 13th, 2009.
Previously, and Mr. Manella, when we had, with Mr. Manella, the issue concerning, we had brought the file notice with the state of Florida concerning sales tax. That note was dated December of 2007. And then Ms. Dunn was hired in June of 2008. Was Ms. Dunn hired during this period in time?
Form. Mr. Fetcher, you're testifying for the witness, sir. I would appreciate it.
I'm trying to speed it along because the exhibits are over there.
I understand you're trying to speed it along, but I don't...
Do you remember the
Sir,
date?
if I may, I don't appreciate
withdraw.
that you're testifying for the witness, sir. I would ask that you please refrain from doing that.
Let me withdraw the question then, Mr. Steinberg. Do you remember the date of the Elizabeth Dunn, the document we just saw with Elizabeth Dunn?
Form.
June 2008.
Would that have occurred during the collection period?
No, not according to this, because the collection period started on December 1st, 2008.
And when did the collection period end?
December 31st, 2008.
Would June 2008 have been during the collection period?
Well, June is not December.
Is it between December 1st and December 31st and 12/31? Or is it, this is due 1/1/2009?
Form.
Was she hired at the point that this notice would have been delivered?
She would have been the accountant at the point that this notice of delinquency was issued.
Thank you. Who is oh, you can hand that over when she's ready. Who is Melissa Meltzer?
Melissa Meltzer was an associate at Berger Singerman. At the time, I was employed by Berger Singerman.
What was her primary was she an attorney?
She was an attorney.
What was her expertise?
She did basic litigation, general litigation.
Do you know who Alan Lebo is?
Yes, Alan Lebo was my partner during the time I was at Berger Singerman.
Would either of them, I'll ask you, this will be exhibit, we're up to 10. Just give me 1, 2, 3 pages. Actually, 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. If I could draw your attention to page 3. Would that be Melissa Melzer that had worked
Yes.
with you previously? Would that have been her? Would she have been writing that? Is that a Burger Singerman email address?
Form.
Yes, it's an email from Melissa Miltzer at Burger Singerman.
Do you see when that was sent?
Sent Tuesday, March 31st, 2009.
Was Melissa Melzer involved in the sales tax voluntary disclosure?
Yes, she was with Alan.
So were they the primary people involved in dealing with the voluntary sales tax disclosure?
Yes, they were.
Who brought the sales tax issue to your attention?
You did.
Did you ever discuss the sales tax issue with Elizabeth Dunn?
I don't recall.
Is it fair to say that Melissa Melzer and I have been dealing directly with each other during this period of time?
Yes.
Moving on to Exhibit 11. Hold on, let me grab it. I'll do it. Give you a little thing. You mentioned Alan Lebo. How do you know Alan Lebo?
Alan was my partner at Burger Singerman.
If I may, this is Exhibit 11. Do you know this document?
Yes, I do.
Could you please explain your relevance to, or what you know of this document?
This is the settlement agreement with the Florida Department of Revenue that Alan was able to negotiate on your behalf.
Do you have any familiarity with the negotiations between Alan or Nick Maneros II and the state of Florida?
Other than I know Alan had correspondence with the department, and I think he made full disclosure as to the facts and circumstances surrounding the failure to pay sales tax, and but those letters would have been written by Alan, and this would have been the result of that correspondence.
In your opinion, and from what you know of the discussions, was the voluntary disclosure an asset to the negotiations and the settlement amount?
I'm going to object to requesting that the witness render an opinion. He's not here to render opinions.
I'm not asking for him to render opinion. I'm saying from what you know of those discussions with Alan, between Alan Lebo and whatever.
Form.
Between Alan Lebo and what you may know of Alan Lebo in those discussions, was the voluntary disclosure an asset?
Form.
Well, I believe it was beneficial to Nick Maneros too, in that Alan was able to negotiate a reduction in the penalty that would otherwise have been paid.
Do you know the approximate amount of those penalties?
I'm afraid not by looking at this document. It appears they still got a little bit of pound of flesh, but how that relates to the overall penalty, I'm not quite sure.
Are tax penalties usually large or small amounts?
They can be quite large.
So did the voluntary disclosure help limit the amount of those penalties?
I would say yes.
Moving on. You have that one as 11, yes. Do you know who Nick Manero Jr. is? Nicholas Manero Jr.?
Yes, I do.
How often did you speak to Nicholas Manero Jr.? And if you could, with specific reference towards
In the deals?
Form.
yes, and with specific reference to the deals that were done, as well as in terms of time.
Okay.
Again, form.
I would say that I spoke with Nick when I had something to report back to him and bringing him up to date on what was happening in the course of the transaction. And so it would not have been with the regularity that I dealt with you, because our relationship during a deal was more of a day-to-day type of relationship, and Nick was more sporadic, I would say, while a deal was going on.
Have you ever heard of the term hands-off owner?
Sure.
What does that mean to you?
It means, to me, an owner that's content to let others take care of the meat and potatoes of the deal, and content also to listen to his professional advisors, and then come to the table at the end of the deal to finalize it, I guess.
Had you ever referred to Mr. Monero? Did you believe Mr. Monero a hands-off owner?
I believe he was, yes, I believe he was a hands-off owner.
Who hired Elizabeth Dunn?
I believe you did.
If I may, this is going to be 12, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages. And why was Elizabeth Dunn hired?
Elizabeth was hired because you were unhappy with Robert Manella, and I thought she could be more responsive to your needs and requests, and consequently I recommended that that she be hired.
Did she in fact get hired by the company?
Yes, she did.
If I may.
May I see it first, please?
You want some coffee? Or?
I'm fine.
Do you want to? Did you want to take that?
I think it's
In
under,
a little bit.
It's being worked on. It's under control, but I appreciate it. My paralegal is working on it. Thank you.
The sticker.
What number?
I believe we're up to 12. This will be Steinberg Exhibit 12. If you could just familiarize yourself briefly with this document.
Mr. Judge, I'm just going to note for the record, I have a standing objection in terms of Mr. Steinberg being shown documents that do not appear to be generated by his office.
With specific...
If I may, sir, please. He's being shown documents that are not generated by his office, you know, obviously if you want to ask him questions about if he recalls certain items, and then if he doesn't, you want to use a document to refresh his recollection, sir, that's one thing, but showing him a document and asking him to read off of a document. If I may, sir, I'm not done, please.
Well, you're making an objection to something that I haven't even finished a question on.
If I may. You're showing him documents before questions are even asked, sir. And so that is the basis of my objection, in that he's being shown documents that do not appear to have been generated by his office, and you're asking him to read off of the document in an attempt to lead his answer and refresh his memory before he even tells you he doesn't remember, sir. Thank you.
With specific reference to the second page, first paragraph. If you had recommended Elizabeth Dunn to work for Nick Monero's too,
Yes?
is it possible that she knew at that point in time about the sales tax issue?
Well, as of October 20th, 2009, she was certainly aware. And the reference is from January through October 2009.
Were you also aware of the sales tax issue during that period?
We became aware of the sales tax issue when we were contacted initially to deal with the Department of Revenue, which would have been sometime in 2009.
Approximately.
Approximately, I think you showed me something March.
Thank you. This is going to be Exhibit 12 that we're up to, or 13 that we're up to? 13. 13. Could you please familiarize yourself with this document? And did you create this document?
Form.
Yes, I created this document.
Did you create the third page of this document?
No, I did not.
Did you create the first two pages of this
The
document?
first 2 pages I did.
What is this document concerning?
A lease amendment to the Ocean Optic lease, which is the Dunedin building.
If you could, with specific reference to now therefore the final paragraph on the first page.
Yes?
Do you remember the improvement allowance?
Do I remember the tenant allowance? Well, that seems to be the subject matter of the Fourth Amendment.
If there was a tenant allowance in this contract, do you remember why this lease extension was signed?
Form. Are you asking him to read off the document?
No,
sir,
I'm
or are you
asking him if he
him to-
remembers anything from the document before I ask him another question.
It appears as though the witness is reading off the document in an attempt to answer your question, sir, which is part of my standing objection.
I would, if you give the witness an opportunity, I would say that the witness is trying to familiarize himself and remember some of the situation concerning the Fourth Amendment to the lease. Was
Yeah.
there a buyout provision in the first
Yes.
first lease?
Yes, there was.
Would the Fourth Amendment to the lease,
Yes, the tenant agreed to waive its right of early termination. And the quid pro quo appears to be the landlord's agreement to pay for half the cost of improvements.
do you remember that deal at all?
I only
To the best of your recollection?
this is about the extent of my memory. What
That's okay.
here?
Let me mark that as exhibit. So do you remember a buyout provision that was waived from the first lease?
Yes, that's what the document states.
Excuse me.
This will be 13. Be grabbing from my piles. Three, four. This will be 4 pages. Did you ever write any subsequent leases for the Ocean Optics building?
Not a subsequent lease, but I believe there was a further amendment.
If I may, this will be Exhibit 14. Does this document look familiar to you?
That's the Fifth Amendment.
Did you create this document?
Yes, I did.
So now I'm going to draw a specific reference, specific attention to, in the first paragraph, where it says Ocean Optics, Inc., a Florida corporation, a division of Halma PLC. What does a division of Halma mean?
I'm not entirely sure. I suppose it meant that Halma PLC was the owner of Ocean Optics Inc.
Would that mean that Halma Group was guaranteeing the lease, or that Ocean Optics was guaranteeing the lease?
Form.
Ocean Optics Inc. was the tenant on the lease. And this document in and of itself would not create a guarantee by Halma.
Do you remember any discussions on that issue?
Yes, I was very concerned because I believe the original lease had a guarantor, and I forget his name was an individual. I think it was the president at that time of Ocean Optics, and my concern was that he no longer wanted to guarantee the lease, and I suggested, I remember quite strongly, that it would benefit Nick Maneros too to have that guarantor replaced.
Did you believe that Ocean Optics was now the guarantor of the lease?
I believe that Ocean Optics Inc. was the tenant. I did not believe there was any guarantor of the lease.
Would it be fair to say that you and I had discussions over that issue?
Yes, we did.
Do you know who Arnold Mosier is?
He was an official with the tenant.
Is it fair to say that I had discussions with Arnold Mosier concerning Ocean Optics' portion of this negotiation?
I believe that's who you negotiated with.
Drawing specific reference to second page, number 4. Do you see where it says calculated at the rate of $10 per square foot for 31,854 square feet?
Yes.
Is that, do you know if that, is that the square footage of the building? By reading that, does it look like it's $10 per square foot for the building, or calculated at the rate of?
If I may, did the witness answer the first question?
No, he didn't. I put no response because if you deem that as the square footage of the building, and I didn't get a response, so I put down no response. And you said by reading the calculated rate of the...
Again, I just once again refer to my standing objection with respect to having the witness, before he even answers the question, directing him and leading him to the response.
Duly noted.
Okay. I am not exactly sure of the square footage of the building, but given the way it's drafted, it would appear that that would be the square footage of the entire building.
Would it be fair to say that that was a detail, one of the details in terms that I had negotiated with Arnold Mosier?
Yes.
If the building is not 31,854 square feet, and is in fact smaller than that, would the rent still be calculated at the base of $10 per square foot for 31,854 square feet?
Yes, that's what the document provides.
So it doesn't have to do with the actual square footage of the building?
All I can tell you it's that it's for 31,854 square feet.
So would it be fair to say that that's one of the terms of the agreement that I negotiated with Arnold Mosier?
Ask them answer.
Yes.
And you agreed to put in proper legal form into the lease agreement?
Into this amendment to lease, correct.
Drawing your attention to number 6, building improvements and penalties.
Yes.
Were those things that we discussed as well?
Yes, they were.
Do you remember in any specificity the question as to penalty rates concerning post-completion?
I remember you spent a lot of time negotiating this clause. And I believe we went through a number of drafts, though I'm not too sure. But I know that this was a very heavily negotiated clause.
Drawing your attention to number 7, the rental abatements. Do you remember the rental abatements issue? To the best of your recollection.
I mean, this was the conclusion of the rental abatement, but I believe this was heavily negotiated as well.
Thank you. Do you know when Nicholas Monero signed this?
The date is October 27, 2010. Typically, Nicholas would have signed it after I presented it to him for signature.
Who did you actually send the final, would you have sent a preliminary agreement to me and we agreed on it?
Yes.
Would you then send a final agreement to him to be signed?
Yes.
Do you know who you sent it to?
I would have sent it to, I may have sent it to Jim Bassett because he had the facilities to print it off. But on other times, Nick would, I believe, go to a Kinko's and print things off. So I can't recall exactly.
But would it be fair to say that this was a final draft agreement that we had agreed upon and then was sent to have Mr. Monero sign?
Yes.
Okay, we're moving on to this is going to be Exhibit 15. This is actually multiple times copied, so I apologize ahead of time. Do you remember this? This is an email of the guarantee from Halma Group PLC.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Do you see where it says on the dated 30th day of June 2011? Very faintly there, right at the bottom, right above witnesses.
Yes,
as to guarantor, and the rest.
That could be June. It's the 30th day of.
Do you remember refinancing the building in Dunedin?
Form.
I remember the refinancing that I was involved in.
Yes, and
in 2005 and 2006.
Were you working for Monero's in 2011?
For part of the year.
Do you remember receiving this guarantee?
I believe you sent me a copy of it.
During the time of getting the copy of this guarantee, did you actually close a loan?
No.
So sometime subsequent to this, had you left the employment of Nick Monero too?
Yes.
Would this guarantee help in a refinance?
It would be one of the things that a lender would look for if it was not happy with the credit of the tenant.
Is it fair to say that Halma Group PLC is now listed as guarantor?
Yes.
Would that solve any issues that had to do with the lease?
Form.
You referenced the question as to whether Halma or Ocean Optics was guaranteeing the lease agreement.
This would establish that there was a guarantor of the lease.
Is a corporate guarantee more beneficial than a personal guarantee?
I'm going to object. I don't understand what the basis of asking him these questions. He's here to testify as to what his facts are, not whether something is beneficial or not beneficial. He's here a fact witness, sir. He's not here to give opinions on...
He's here as my witness.
Sir, he's a fact witness. Yes, you've subpoenaed him or requested that he appear as a fact witness. He is not an expert witness. He's not here to give opinions, sir.
During our negotiations that we had had in the past between you and I, would this have been something that I would have gotten to make sure that we had the best possible situation in any refinance or negotiations of leases?
Form.
Again, I come back to our initial or to a question that you asked me several questions ago, that it would be beneficial to have a guarantor of the lease, and that the form of the Fifth Amendment in and of itself did not provide for a guarantee.
A credit-rated tenant would be the most beneficial for receiving. Is that correct?
Form.
A credit-rated tenant increases your chance at more favorable financing.
Yes, thank you. Do you remember, how many times we had meetings in your office?
While a deal was going on, we would have several meetings.
Is it fair to say that I would try and stop in and we'd have like moments to catch up and get familiarized with whatever was proceeding?
Yes, I think that's fair to say.
In 2010, the lease negotiations for Dunedin were beginning.
Is that a question?
Would we have
Objection.
Would we have had a meeting in 2010?
Related to the Fifth Amendment, because I believe that was signed in 2010, yes, we would have had meetings.
Do you remember specifically a meeting in late March, early April, after the sales tax situation had largely finished and the lease negotiations were beginning?
Form.
I don't have a specific recollection.
Do you ever remember bringing it to my attention that there was no signed document stating that the property in North Carolina was mine?
Yes, I remember a general discussion as to that point, because I was unaware of that.
Do you remember that you brought it to my attention that the $500,000 wasn't in writing as well?
Well, that is, again, something you told me, and I was taken by surprise, to say the least.
That's perfectly fine. So it was your impression that it wasn't, that you hadn't seen it in writing, so...
Well, it was the first that I had been made aware that there was something, anything other than Nick Monero's too, owning these assets.
Would it be fair to say that we then continued to finish the lease negotiations? To the best of your recollection, knowing that we...
I'm a bit unclear as to the time frame.
Well, if I may, so that I can help I can help the witness out. In 2009, there was the sales tax issue that we've already seen, from beginning through the end, with the culmination this summer of the agreement with the state of Florida.
Correct.
In October of 2010, the Dunedin 5th extension is signed by Nick in October of 2010. Had there been negotiations prior to October on that lease negotiation?
Yes.
Again, I just want to note my objection, my standing objection with respect to leading this witness.
Would it be fair to say that prior to those lease negotiations, the lease that was signed in October, did we have a meeting?
Yes.
And at that meeting, it had been brought to your attention that I had an interest in North Carolina and had money in the company.
Objection asked and answered.
At which point, did you ask me, is it in writing?
Form.
I believe I asked you, do you have anything in writing, so I can familiarize myself with the details.
Did I proceed to finish the lease negotiations?
Yes.
Moving on to, this is going to be Exhibit 16. Have you ever seen this document?
Yes, I believe I received a copy of it a number of months after the date it was signed.
Is it fair to say that this document signed in October was done around the same time that the lease negotiations were finishing up?
Form?
It appears that they were both done in October.
How did you receive this document?
I believe you emailed it to me the following year.
Why would I have been emailing this document to you?
I don't know.
What does this document state that I'm a secretary, treasurer, and officer?
Objection. The document speaks for itself.
Did you ever speak to
Mr.
Nick
Fetcher,
about this
if I may,
document?
sir, let me, please. The document speaks for itself. He's testified, sir, that he received this document from you, sir. I don't know where you're going with this. It doesn't appear that this witness has any personal knowledge as to the preparation of this document. If you want to ask him what he did before, after, I have no problem with that, but I have a problem with, again, attempting to lead the witness in answering questions and asking him to interpret a document that he had no participation in preparing.
He was an advisor for the company at this point in time.
Sir, you asked him a question, sir. You asked him
And if you'd let him answer
how
it.
he received it, and he received it from you, sir. So, I don't know where
I
you're
would
going
act-
with this, sir, but
I was actually...
you're asking him on what the document says that you're...
Your objection is noted,
Sir,
counsel.
I'm not done. You're asking him to read off of a document and then asking him, was I an officer or director of the company? Again, you are attempting to lead, and it is improper, sir. You're going beyond the leading, sir. You are influencing this individual's testimony, and it's really gone too far.
I appreciate your point, but it's not your decision to
It's
make.
okay, sir. We'll leave that for the court to
Mr.
decide, sir.
Steinberg, in October of 2010, were you working for Nick Monero's 2?
Yes.
At what point did you stop working for Nick Monero's 2?
The summer of 2011.
When did you receive this document?
I believe it was the summer of 2011.
Had you ever discussed this document with Mr. Monero previously?
Previously to when?
Previously, between October and June of 2011.
No.
So upon getting this document, that was when you were you left Monero's employment?
I believe that I was still employed at that time, but when I received this, that this was one of the factors that I took into consideration to lead me to resign.
Had you ever, and you had never discussed the implications, why would this have led you to resign from the company?
Because I had never seen it before, and
What would be the significance
Sir,
of it?
please let him answer the question.
And I suppose I felt that this would have been something that I, as the company's attorney, should have been fully apprised of at the time. So, and if this was in fact the agreement, I would have been instructed to craft a proper employment agreement and also prepare a proper director's resolution to adopt whatever decisions the sole director had made. I know this is a corporate meeting of officers, And one of my concerns is that officers do not vote with the same technical requirements as a director's resolution would incur. So an officer's resolution really doesn't hold much meaning to me.
Thank you. Moving on to exhibit, we're up to exhibit 17. Actually, I'll give you this one. Did you create that document?
I don't recall whether I created this or not.
Are you familiar with BLX Capital LLC?
BLX Capital was the lender on Pinehurst, on the Pinehurst acquisition, I believe.
What is a certificate of cash injection?
Well, it is a statement, I guess, that the lender wanted to confirm that the individuals had injected capital into Nick Monero's 2 Inc.
Did both Nicholas Monero and myself sign as individuals?
Yes.
Would it be normal for somebody who has no interest in the company to sign individually?
Again, I'm going to object. Whether or not it's normal or not is not what...
Does this document
If I may, sir, please, let me state my objection. Whether or not it is normal or not for someone to sign a document is irrelevant to Mr. Is not within the scope of what Mr. Steinberg is here for, sir, which is to act as a fact witness.
Mr. Steinberg, did you do the documentation for the purchase of Pinehurst, North Carolina?
I prepared some of the documents and reviewed some of the documents.
Would it be fair to say that that a certificate of cash injection would be something that you would prepare along with the rest of those documents?
I'm not sure whether I prepared it or whether the lender's attorney prepared it, but it was a document, it appears, that the lender wanted signed in order to advance the loan.
Am I signing this individually?
You're signing individually.
So according to this document, did I inject cash into the company for the purchase of North Carolina?
You've asked me a very specific question, as it does not state exactly for the acquisition of property in North Carolina. It states that it's in satisfaction of terms of a loan agreement executed of this date. So I guess one can make the deduction that that's what the funds were being used for, and it was in that context that this document was signed.
I refer you back to the previous exhibit. Was it 17, 16?
It's got 17 in this. Oh,
16.
16, yes.
Had there ever been any writings of the fact that I injected capital into the company?
Well, subsequent, yes. This states that if you injected... This isn't an injection. This states that with a contribution of assets. So I guess in terms it is an injection, but it's a contribution. That is the other writing. It's it's 5 years later, I guess.
Would that have been in reference to the fact that that you had not had it in writing?
form?
I guess this was an attempt to reflect that a certain amount of the acquisition purchase price were delegated to you.
So would it be fair to say that these documents are related?
Again, Mr. Fetcher, you're asking him to
okay. No more
comment,
questions.
sir, on documents that, one, he told you he
actually
didn't prepare,
prepared. He
and
did
one,
prepare.
he said on the corporate officers, corporate officers, a meeting that he simply received, sir. So I don't know where we're going with this.
There could be a relationship between the two documents.
Thank you.
Did you say, if I may for the record, did you say could or would, sir?
There could.
It's typo.
Did you correct me?
You want to go over the audio? Okay.
When you received that in writing, did it alter or change your opinion in any way? And I'm going to, before you answer, I'm actually going to bring up Exhibit 18 at this point in time.
Are you going to ask him to answer the question before you show him the exhibit, sir? Or are you going to show him the
I'm
exhibit?
going to, this is change his opinion as to this writing.
Again, he's not here to testify as to opinions.
Would you, as an attorney, have written, did you write this document?
I was instructed to prepare this document.
Based on the other writings, would you have, is this document, could you have still created this document?
Form.
Can you tell me what other
Could you have
writings?
had me removed as an officer knowing that I had placed cash and assets into the company?
I'm trying to think of what one has to do with the other. I received a direction from the director of the company to remove you as an officer. I think that's a separate issue as to whether you had cash in the company. It's very hard because I don't.
Would you normally notice the person involved?
Notice the person involved.
Form.
To give you notice of this,
Yes.
it all depends on what the agreement is between me and the person that tells me. I believe in this case, I left it to Nick or Jim, and I think it was Nick, to advise you that you were being removed.
Were you speaking to Jim Bassett at this point in time?
I can't recall if I had a specific conversation on this with Mr. Bassett.
If I had had assets in the company and had put cash into the company, what would I have been a creditor of the company at this point in time?
Again, objection. You're asking this witness to opine as to whether or not you were a creditor of the company, sir. He's not here to testify as to whether or not you were a creditor. He's here to testify as to what facts he knows of the transactions at issue.
And I'm asking what the facts were that...
I don't believe you are, sir.
What the facts are that led to this. Did you speak to Jim Bassett at this point in time?
I don't believe that was your question. I'm
Actually,
going
it was.
to object as to form.
I can't recall if I spoke to Jim Bassett. My recollection is that the direction came from Nick. to create this document.
Were you at all in discussions with Jim Bassett at around this time?
I can't recall, honestly.
When did you ever have discussions with Jim Bassett?
Over the course of my engagement 2005 to 2011, yes, from time to time.
Did you ever, or often say, ask Arik if people had questions?
I don't know whether I used the term ask Arik, but I would say that Arik would be the person with the most knowledge on any particular transaction, yes.
Who would you usually tell it to? No, just, I mean, you can hand it over if you want. Who would often ask you those questions?
Objection, Mr. Floor.
Let me rephrase the question. If you did say that concerning transactions that the company was involved in, why was I not consulted on these?
Go ahead
On the
and check
last-
here.
on the-
Mischaracterizing the witness's testimony, sir.
Okay, am I mischaracterizing your testimony?
Why were you not
And why was, if I knew the most about most of the transactions, what was different about this transaction?
Well, that's not a transaction. That's a corporate decision made by the director and sole shareholder of the entity. So it wasn't in the guise of a transaction occurring. It was a direction received from the person who is in control and owns the corporation.
When we had, do you remember the Texas deal? The deal for the closing of Katy, Texas?
Yes. I mean, I have a general recollection.
Who spoke with the bankers and accountants for Countrywide?
I believe you were involved in that.
Do you remember how many different bankers were involved in that deal?
Well, I know we hired a mortgage broker. I think it was Meridian, who did a lot of the legwork, and I think you would have spent a lot of time dealing with the mortgage broker, and as did I, quite frankly. And of course, I dealt with the lender's attorneys as well.
Did I travel to Texas?
You told me you did.
Did I meet with the Countrywide bankers in Texas?
You told me you did.
Did I meet with the real estate agent when I went to Texas?
I believe you did.
Had Nick previously been to Texas?
I think he went and inspected the building, or at least went to look at it.
Would it refresh your recollections if he went to Texas and the deal fell through? That there were two deals in Texas?
Objection. I don't think there's a question there. I'm going to object to form.
I mean, you can refresh my memory. I know that you were looking at a number of 1031 properties. That's what I recall.
That's...
And I believe I'll go further. I think one of them was a Walgreens drugstore. I could be wrong on that.
There were several.
Okay, there were several.
But the question...
I know you looked at several properties before deciding on this one.
We'll go to the... This will be... What are we up to? 19? This document's dated June 16th, 2010,
Yes?
and the previous document, previous Exhibit 18, was dated 10th of June, 2012.
Yes?
Do you know who Jim Bassett is?
Yes?
Do you know who Elizabeth Dunn is?
Yes.
Do you have any idea what make his position clear to you?
I have no knowledge what he's referring to here.
Do you know recent correspondence 6869?
No, I don't.
I'd like to note for the record that this is a letter to Elizabeth Dunn from James Bassett. Again, the witness is being asked to questions on a document that do not appear he had any involvement in its preparation. He wasn't the recipient.
Was I doing the lease negotiations for the company at this point in time?
With Ocean Optics,
Yes.
you probably were, judging by the date.
So would it be fair to say that I was fairly occupied with the negotiations with the company while this was going on?
Well, it's the this that I'm not too sure of because I don't know what the document refers to. I can tell you that you were involved with negotiations that whatever this refers to was being delivered to Elizabeth.
Moving on. Were you involved at all in the lease renegotiations in Texas?
A couple I was involved.
Was Jim Bassett ever involved in those lease negotiations?
I can't recall, Mark.
That's okay.
Sorry.
That's all right. Would you say that the lease negotiations that I did worked out well for the company?
In Texas or
In,
generally?
In the ones that I was involved in that you have firsthand knowledge of?
Again, the witness is being asked his opinion. This is not here to give his opinion. He's here to give facts, sir.
Were there ever any major mistakes that were made that you had to rectify in negotiations that I had done?
I can't recall that we made mistakes or that you made mistakes, no.
Were there ever any significant mistakes that were made between either when negotiations were done between the two of us?
I don't believe. Let's put it this way: no mistakes have come to light as of today.
I'm going to draw your. This is going to be. What are we up to? Did we just do 19?
Okay, 20 is the next one.
20, yeah.
May not be good.
Here.
No.
While she's writing that down, would you like to... This is a document dated 6/8/2010. Were you familiar with this disbursements issue?
I did not have any specific familiarity as to deductions, but in general, I believe Mr. Bassett raised some concerns as to disbursements.
Do you have any recollection or any knowledge of this compensation to AF references Arik Fetcher myself? So, do you have any knowledge of this compensation to myself issue?
No, I was not really involved in too much of this, if anything.
This is June 8th of 2010. The Florida sales tax issue. Had you already finalized that issue by then?
Form.
That was finalized late August of 2009.
So in 6/8/2010, what sales tax issue would they be referencing?
I am not sure.
Do you know what corporate tax issue they might be referencing?
No, I would not.
Were you familiar with the sales tax issue yourself? Had you worked on the sales tax issue yourself?
Form.
Had your firm worked on the
The
sales?
firm had worked on it.
Would it be
Yes.
fair to say that by 6/8/2010, the sales tax issue had been finalized and moving forward?
Form. Asked and answered.
A settlement agreement had been entered into, and I believe that settlement agreement called for periodic payments. Whether they had all been completed by June 8th, 2010, I don't know. I don't have that.
Exactly. But would it be fair to say that the negotiations with the state of Florida and any negotiations had been finalized by June 8th, 2010?
Yes.
Form.
Were you aware of the issue prior to June 8th, 2010?
Asked and answered.
The sales tax issue?
Yes.
Yes, I was aware of it in 2009.
Okay, thank you. '21.
Here you go.
Did you write this document?
I prepared this document.
Did Nick make James Bassett an officer of the company?
Yes, he did.
Is James Bassett paid a salary?
I am not aware.
Was James Bassett previously paid a salary?
As a salaried employee of the company, I am not aware.
Was James Bassett previously used by the company?
Form.
Was James Bassett the accountant for the company?
Yes.
At what point in time was James Bassett the accountant for Nick Monero's 2?
I believe prior to my involvement with Nick Monero's 2.
After your involvement with Nick Monero's 2, was James Bassett the accountant in 2005?
I am not sure when I first met or became aware of Jim Bassett as Nick's accountant. So I can't go back into a point in time and tell you when exactly I did become aware of him.
Was Robert Manella the Nick Monero's 2 accountant in 2005?
Yes.
Was Robert Manella the accountant in 2006?
Yes.
Was Robert Manella the accountant in 2007?
Yes.
Was Elizabeth Dunn hired as the accountant in 2008?
Yeah, going to object.
We can reference the early exhibit if you need to refresh if you need to refresh your memory. But at some point, was Elizabeth Dunn hired subsequent to Robert Manella?
Yes, she was hired subsequent.
Was Elizabeth Dunn the accountant in 2010?
I believe so.
In 2011, was Elizabeth Dunn the accountant?
I believe she was, but I'm not sure.
But not exactly sure.
We're not exactly
Please
sure.
let the witness answer.
If you're not exactly sure,
Yeah.
you can just please say not exactly sure. Is it fair to say that James Bassett is replaced to be a secretary and treasurer at this point in time?
At this point in time, I'm not aware of who the officers are.
As of the writing of this letter, was James Bassett replaced to be a secretary and treasurer? Was that your understanding of what this meant?
Objection. Witnesses testified or as to that already, sir.
Well, I must have missed the answer.
Can you
I
read
just-
back the answer, please? The question and the answer?
Did James Bassett replace me as secretary or treasurer? Objection, witnesses testified and answered already.
Before that.
Okay, you're not exactly sure if it's fair to say that James Bassett was a secretary and treasurer at that point in time. At that point in time, I'm not aware of who the officers are.
Does that document have James Bassett, it placed James, you wrote that document, correct?
Yes.
To the best of your understanding, does that document place James Bassett as an officer of the company?
He is elected secretary and treasurer of the corporation.
As secretary, who was the previous secretary and treasurer of the corporation?
I believe you were.
Is James Bassett replacing me as secretary and treasurer of the corporation?
Yes.
Thank you.
Actually, may I?
You can, if you have more to answer.
Yes, because I'm just looking at the dates. You were removed in 2010, so for a period of time, there was no secretary-treasurer until a new one was elected or appointed a few months later. So when you say, did James Bassett replace me, technically he did not replace you. The position was vacant. And that's a very technical distinction that I thought should be made.
That's fine. I'm well aware of your technical distinctions, Mr. Steinberg. I've worked with you in the past. How well have you spoken to Jim Bassett since then? Since the signing of this letter? Since that document was created?
Since 2011, yes, I believe I've had some conversations with him.
If I may interject, Mr.
He can act. He can.
Hold on, sir.
He can do it himself.
Mr. Steinberg, to the extent that Mr. Bassett, after Mr. Fetcher was no longer employed with the company, sir, which I think it's safe to say that in January of 2011,
that would be no.
Sir, hold on. Was no longer employed by the company.
No, actually, we can stop right there because
Sir, I'm
the
not
date.
done. I am not done, sir. Let me finish, please. I'm going to instruct you, sir, that to the extent you had any conversations with Mr. Bassett in rendering legal advice, sir, to the company, just to the company, sir, I'm going to direct you to that we are asserting our attorney-client privilege with respect to those communications. Mr. Fetcher, you can continue, sir.
Is it your statement on the record that I was fired in January of 2011?
No, sir, that is not my statement. What I am saying
Can you read
sir,
back his answer, please?
Is that in January of 2011, I think it's fair to say that you were no longer an employee of the company, sir.
Can you please read that? So in January of 2011, I was fired. Can you please read back the answer?
I withdraw that, actually. No, that is not the case, Mr. Steinberg.
Withdraw all of it.
Mr. Fetcher, relax, sir, okay? I don't need you to talk to me that way. It's very unprofessional, sir, okay? I'm not going to sit here. You're a pro se, sir, but you are an attorney. So please be mindful of your position, sir, and be respectful like everyone else, sir. Mr. Steinberg, I'm going to retract that, sir. He was with the company at that point in time, I believe, sir.
So that would mean that any discussions that you had with me from that point on would also would be excluded.
Not necessarily, sir. You can ask your questions, and if I believe that there's an attorney-client privilege that I need to assert on behalf of my client, I will do so.
Was Mr. Bassett a client of the company? Was Mr. Bassett a client of your firm?
No.
Was Mr. Bassett working for the company?
As its accountant, I believe.
At what point in time?
I believe Mr. Bassett has been the accountant from the time that I was engaged to the time that I resigned. So
The accountant for Nick Moneros too?
The accountant for Nick Moneros too.
So was he doing any work for Nick Moneros too during that period in time?
I imagine he was. He would have, as the accountant of the company, but I don't have any direct knowledge that I can recall right now.
Did you ever report to Mr. Bassett during that period in time?
Report to Mr. Bassett. I would have had discussions with Mr. Bassett between 2005 and 2011.
What's your opinion of Mr. Bassett?
Again, he's not here to render opinions, sir.
What would you discussed with? What were some of the things you discussed with Mr. Bassett? Topics.
I believe we would talk about general business activities. I believe one of the items that I was concerned about and wanted to make Mr. Bassett aware of was the fact that in 2012 the principal and interest on the Houston building loan would become due as opposed to interest only, and discuss that with him. Just general company ongoings.
Was he aware that the loan was coming due in January of 2012?
Which loan are you
Was he
referring to?
aware? You just said that a loan was coming
No.
due.
I said that at the end of 5 years, after on the Houston building, it was a 10-year loan, interest only for the first 5 years, and then principal would kick in for the final 5 years. And I was just concerned as to cash flows and things like that.
Did he seem competent to deal with that issue?
Again, he's not here to render opinions.
In
as
your
to someone's
opinion, and
competence, sir.
relevant, I will ask it then, in comparison to the negotiations that we had.
Form.
I did not. I don't think I had enough. I didn't have enough working experience with Mr. Bassett as to decide that I wasn't going to tell him. I mean, he was the accountant for Moneros, so he was the proper party to speak to.
I'm going to reference, this is, you can hold that. I'm going to reference, this is going to be Exhibit 22. 2 pages.
Mr. Steinberg, may I just see what you're looking at, sir? Thank you.
Okay.
Was Elizabeth Dunn hired to be the accountant for Nick Moneros too?
Again, I'm going to object. I'm attempting to use a document here to elicit testimony out of the witness.
Well, I am holding an engagement letter dated March 28, 2011.
Was she previously the accountant for the company?
I imagine not prior to March 28, 2011.
Was Elizabeth Dunn the accountant for the company? Had you recommended Elizabeth Dunn to be the accountant for the company?
I had recommended her to you.
Had she been hired by the company? Previously?
Previously to March 28, 2011?
Yes.
I don't know.
Okay. Had you thought of her as the accountant for the company in March of 2011? According to your previous
Sir,
testimony.
please allow him to answer the question, sir.
I mean, at a point in time, I knew that Mr. Manello was relieved and Elizabeth it took over, and then I'm just having difficulty putting it into the time frame.
Okay.
So, but I knew one followed the other.
And you were the attorney for the company. You were kept up to date on most things.
Form.
I was the attorney for the company.
Looking at Exhibit 24, you can hand those over. Are you familiar with this letter at all?
No.
Were you working for Monero's at this point in time?
I believe that I had just resigned around this time.
Do you know who the attorney working with you to resolve some issues is?
No.
So, as of February 23rd, 2012, payment in full, did you have anything to do or any knowledge of any of these events between August 9th, 2011 and February 23rd of 2012?
No.
Form.
Is there anything you'd like to say? I mean, I see you pouring over it. So if you have something to add to it.
I have nothing to add. It just, I guess my curiosity is seeing something for the first time. That's all.
I will now bring, this is going to be Exhibit 25.
It's 22. Can we just go off the record 1 second?
Time is 11:48, and I'm off the record.
I'm sorry. I have a...
Time is 11:49, we're back on the record.
We're back on the record. It's we were just having a discussion off the record as to the exhibit numbers. It appears we have an Exhibit 21, which was a written consent in lieu of special meeting of the sole director, which appears to be dated January 11, 2011. Then we have an Exhibit 22, which is reference compilation engagement letter dated March 28, 2011. That is Exhibit 22. We do not have an Exhibit 23 yet, although as Exhibit 24, we have a letter dated August 9, 2011, subject disengagement due to non-payment. I just wanted to make that clear for the record that while we were referencing an Exhibit 24, that there is no Exhibit 23 yet, that it's been skipped, and I'm not sure if Attorney Fetcher is going to label the next document Exhibit 23 or just move on to 25. I leave that to him.
As the record already reflected, the next exhibit is Exhibit 25.
I guess that answers my question.
Okay.
This is a letter dated 9/29/2011. Do you know who Lincoln Briggs is?
Yes, I do.
How do you know Lincoln Briggs?
Lincoln Briggs is an attorney in Connecticut and was Nick's attorney up in that area of the world.
When was the first time that you spoke to Mr. Briggs?
Oh, I can't really recall it. I mean, I did speak to him, but I could not point it exactly when.
Do you know if Mr. Briggs is currently employed?
Objection, Mr. Fetcher. What does this have to do with the lawsuit, sir?
I'm simply asking also in
What
the
does-
years, the fiscal, you can, you
Go
know,
ahead.
you,
I'm sorry, sir. Go ahead.
do you know whether Nick Monero's 2 runs on a fiscal or calendar year?
No, I do not.
Do you know what a fiscal year is?
Yes.
If a fiscal year ends June 30th, 2010, what would be the start date for that fiscal year?
July 1st, 2009.
So when this note references 2 fiscal years ended 6/30/2010 and 6/30/2011, those would be for the years from July of '09 to June of 2010, and July of 2010 to July of 2012.
Objection. Form.
With reference to the period July of '09 to June of 2010, did you know what was going on at the company?
In relation to what?
In relation to either tax returns, the mortgage refinance, the lease renegotiation. Did you know what was going on in the company during that period in time?
Objection as to form.
Well, I was aware so far as things were happening. Yes, I mean, but the things of which I had involvement with, I was aware.
Would you say that you had contact with me during that period?
Yes.
Would we have created, I assume, books, records for us? It would have been lease negotiations, etc. Had we created books and records during that period in time?
Well, we had legal documents resulting from transactions that we were involved with.
Would Mr. Bassett or Mr. Monero been able to get those records for those 2 fiscal years?
Form.
Well, certainly the stuff that I made closing books, and I would have them available or delivered them.
During that period in time, had he been made an officer of the company? Was Nick Monero the sole shareholder
Sir,
during that period
I
in
don't believe I
time?
heard an answer to his question.
I'll rephrase.
Yeah.
Was Nick Monero Jr. the sole shareholder during that period in time?
Form.
Yes.
As a sole shareholder, would he have had the ability to request any documents?
Form.
Yes.
As the sole shareholder, would he have had the ability to contact the payroll company?
Objection. You're asking this witness to testify.
I'm asking this witness if, as a sole shareholder,
Sir, asking this witness his opinion, or asking him to...
No, I'm not.
Sir, you are. You're asking him whether or not someone can do something, contact someone that he has no connection to.
During the period 2009 to 2010, as the corporation's attorney, could you have drafted a document for Nick Monero that would have gotten him all the pertinent information?
Yes, I could have drafted a document for Nick had he asked me to draft him a document.
During that period when you were still employed, just concerning the period while you were employed, as the sole shareholder of the company, could he have had access to the payroll accounts?
Objection is the
As previously seen, the previous exhibit into it, would Nick have had access to the payroll account information?
Objection as to form.
I believe he could have, based on what I saw previously.
In your opinion, would there have been anything
Again,
that he didn't have?
objection. There's no opinions that are being given by Mr. Steinberg here today, Mr. Fetcher. He's a fact witness, sir.
In your opinion, could you have written the documents that you had written, would they have given the access to those accounts to Nick Monero or James Bassett?
Well, I mean, I had documents in my office that related to the transactions in which I was involved. I also prepared closing books on transactions, on the acquisitions. They were always available to Nick, or to well, basically to Nick as director and shareholder of the corporation.
Is there anything that wouldn't have been available to the sole shareholder of the corporation?
Form.
What might not have been available to the sole shareholder of the corporation?
Form.
Answer honestly, to the best of your ability. I mean,
I believe he's answered honestly and to the best of his ability this whole time here, Mr. Fetcher, so I'm not sure what you're implying by that, sir.
I mean, there's in any typically it's his company, Art, so he's entitled to see whatever he wants to see.
thank you. That was all. That's
Okay.
all I. That's,
All right, I did.
That was it. That was all I was asking.
Okay.
Glad we got there.
Storage of spaces and payroll accounts included.
Mr. Fetcher, I'm going to note that that statement you just made, sir, should be stricken from the record.
This is Exhibit 26.
Okay.
Do you know who Elizabeth Dunn is?
Yes.
Was she the accountant hired by Nick Maneros too?
I think he's answered that several times already, sir. Objection.
Yes.
Do you have any familiarity with the tax returns in 2006, 2007, 2008?
None.
Do you have any recollection of me forgetting to file things?
No.
In our dealings, had I ever forgotten important items?
I think you were very diligent.
Thank you. This will be Exhibit 27. It's going to be 3 pages.
Mr. Steinberg, may I see it, please? Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Do you know who Judd McGee is?
No, I don't.
Do you know who Barnes and Associates are?
No, I don't.
Do you know if Barnes and Associates completed any tax returns for Nick Maneros too?
Objection. He's already answered this.
No, I'm
You know
asking.
what? Can I read?
Yes.
Because now I see Adam Small's names on here, and I see Barnes CPA.
Yes.
So I did not know that Adam worked. That was the name of his firm. So I know Adam Small, and I know Barnes, but I only in terms of that. It is Adam's accounting firm. I'm sorry. Could we go off the record for 2 seconds, please?
Time is 12:02 and we're off the record.
Thank you.